hearty welcome to our drive-in theater. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family. We're glad you came as you are. We just want you to enjoy yourselves. Don't forget to visit our refreshment center during the intermission or any time. You love the tasty array of snacks we have to offer. So will the youngsters.
Your attention, please. All new hotshot electric in-car heaters have been installed for your comfort and convenience. Just insert heater through car window and turn on the switch. When leaving, please turn switch off and replace on speaker post. Warning, high voltage. If you need assistance, please notify the theater box office or concession manager.
You get more out of life when you go out to a movie.
It's 4 minutes till showtime.
Top quality hamburgers, the most popular snack in the country. We serve them plain or garnished to your taste.
There are words men live by, words of strength, of wisdom, and of peace. We urge you to find the spiritual comfort and guidance we all so greatly need by attending your place of worship regularly. Yum, yum. It's a meal in itself. Our all-meat super dog. Enjoy one now.
It's 3 minutes till showtime.
Pictures to see, delightful snacks to nibble. A gay, pleasant evening for all. Oh, a word of caution. Don't drive over 10 miles an hour in the theater area for your safety's sake. And Mom or Pop, go with the kids when they leave the car. We hope you have a wonderful time. Come back soon.
Hey, fellas, don't fight over that hot dog. There's plenty for everyone. Big, plump, and juicy, wrapped in an oven-fresh bun. Add mustard, relish, ketchup, and go to work. Yes, the hot dogs at our refreshment center are the best you'll find anywhere. Everybody agrees on that.
Yes, sir. The hot dogs at our concession stand do rate an appreciative whistle.
It's 2 minutes till showtime.
We're happy to have you with us this evening and want you to enjoy every minute of your stay here. And while you relax and stretch, visit our concession where you'll find something to please you. There are ice-cold drinks, delicious sandwiches, ice cream, coffee and snacks, and many other pleasing treats. Our foods are fresh and tasty, our drinks satisfying and refreshing. They're so good.
It's 1 minute till showtime.
Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.
And now, on with the show.
just over the county line. The one with the good Chinese restaurant and the movie theater that smells of popcorn. Good smell. Good people.
Before becoming a New South industrial center in the 20th century, or a commercial port town in the 19th century, Kingsport was the hallowed land of Cherokee Nation, notably Long Island of the Holston, located upriver from the convergence of the north and south forks of the Holston River. Long Island was the location of ancient Native American villages. Later, during the era of the Cherokee, many tribes held talks and made treaties with one another on the island, which was mutually agreed to be considered a holy place where nothing was to be killed. Probably knew it in their dialect of Peace Island, or Big Island. The early white explorers also referred to it as Peace Island, Big Island, and Long Island. Had this 4-mile-long, half-mile-wide island been located in any other river in Tennessee, it would not possess the significance that it has. This spit of land could be called the birthplace of Tennessee and even Kentucky, one possible origin for the name of the state of Tennessee from the language of the Yuchi Indians, Tanasi, meaning meeting place, which may be derived from the island. The Tanasee is first mentioned as the base of various English colonial traders and contained Chota and other Native American towns. Tanasee appears on maps of the Overhill territory produced in 1720s, when the head man of Cherokee was Tanasi, known simply as Tanasi Warrior, chief of the Overhill towns in Tennessee and western North Carolina until 1730. Amatoya Moitoi of Tellico, or Amo Adawehi, Rainmaker, was made first beloved man of the Cherokee, and his wife was Gosa Duiska. Moitoi was referred to as king in official reports. He was crowned emperor of Cherokee. As a result, his town of Great Tellico became the richest Cherokee town. Then Amoskosidi, Dreadful Water, his son, attempted to take over as first beloved man, but ultimately the elder Konoktoko, Standing Turkey, of Chota, became the first beloved man of the Cherokee from 1753 until he died in 1760. Europeans referred to him as Old Hop, and his nephew was Adakulakula, who would be the first beloved man from 1761 to around 1775. Adakulakula's ears were cut and banded with silver, hanging nearly down to his shoulders, which were slender as he was delicate and remarkably small, which is why he was called Little Carpenter to the English. Chota usurped Tellico as the mother town of the Overhill Cherokee. When Cherokees had differences among themselves, Old Hop had a great capacity to bring them together. Typically, he avoided making decisions himself. He was extremely cool-headed and patient with the hastier Cherokees around him, unusually circumspect. Old Hop was the near-perfect embodiment of the Cherokee ideas about proper leadership behavior. The largest native rock shelter in East Tennessee is at Long Island. It's accessible since the prehistoric times underneath the cliff on the right across the South Fork River Bridge in Eastman. In the 70s, they would get down on the island and wade the Sleuth, or take the crooked road, which is now Moreland Drive, and to work yourself around the bottom of the cliff over to it. Native Americans lived in these grounds. It looks deceiving because the sheltered area, 20 feet of dry space, is hidden from view. It's considered disrespectful and kind of an unspoken rule to not dig Cherokee places, especially burial grounds, but that didn't bother archaeologist S.D. Dean. He found black glass from probable old rum bottles. and a metal bit that said CC&O Kingsport. Then unsurfaced debitage, fire-cracked rocks, charcoal, shellfish such as mussels that they ate from right out of the river, which are no longer available due to the dam and the pollution, along with the rock tools used to open them, 9,000 pieces of pottery, 19,000 pieces of flint, 750 projectile points, over 40,000 pieces of animal bone, primarily white-tailed deer, came to be looked at. People call projectile points found in this area arrowheads because it was commonly understood the Cherokee inhabited this area for 400 years. But if you take the time Paleo-Indians were here back 13,000 years, Cherokee would only be 3%, being the last 400 years of it. The supposed arrowheads would be spear points or dart tips because bow and arrow was invented around 1000 BC. Cherokee weren't identifiable until late 1600s, and there are lots of dispersing tribes that are forgotten. For example, a chieftain in Georgia controlled a sprawling territory all the way up to Dandridge, Tennessee, and kept a large network. S.D. Dean, or David Dean, found many buried people when it was excavated, and one of them had a missing head and hip. So he speculated they were maybe mangled by an animal, and then later gathered and brought back to the site to be buried. Another body bore an arrow or spear tip lodged between two ribs in the back. Some people have found caves with Indian skeletons and artifacts, and eschewed touching anything or telling anyone to avoid having people disrespect the ruins. The Indians called the Holston River Hogohigi, and the land was considered hunting grounds, abounding in animal life and pristine forest. Because rivers flowed to the great seas, they held spiritual meaning for the Indians who believed that the great islands in these holy waterways were places to rest, and a refuge for man, and that all talks or treaties held on the island were blessed by the Great Spirit. The river provided mobility to Native Americans with their hollowed-out tree canoes, made by burning the roots and extinguishing it at the base. Nearby there was the Great Trading Path and the Great Indian Warpath, which crossed the Long Island and traveled in a southwestern direction in shorter route to the Cherokee towns, but only usable in dry weather. The ceremonial Long Island site was strictly for council, and it was forbidden to kill or molest anyone on this sacred ground. That is, until the major intrusion of whites into the area. It had already been penetrated before the English charter to Carolina Company included what is now Tennessee in the colony of Carolina in the mid-1600s, originally granted by King Charles of England to Sir Robert Heath, who named it Carolina after the king, and was later turned into colonies given to a dozen lord proprietors. Believing treasure cities were waiting to be plundered in the vast reaches of the wilderness, the mounted Spanish conquistadors were the first strangers to ransack the Indian villages in the valleys of Tennessee, though. The Adelantado, or King of Florida, who was also governor of the island of Cuba, Knight Commander Hernando de Soto, had pillaged nearby natives for food and mussel pearls, searching the river for gold and other treasures they would never find. This behavior presumably gave a bad image to any outsiders. During this time, Tennessee was in province of Florida, which was the Spanish territory. French people had staked their claim in Mississippi Valley to Canada, and the English had Virginia and Carolina grants, which had indefinite limits westward. But the French traders were becoming less influential in the east part of present Tennessee, as more English traders came over the mountains and settled among the Cherokee. Marrying into the tribe, this persistent penetration overwhelmed the Spanish and French claims of force. When Virginia was partitioned in 1663, Tennessee became a western part of Carolina. 30 years later, a further division left Tennessee within the jurisdiction of North Carolina. Ideas about the region remained vague well into the middle of the 18th century. There were reports of a wood ranger commissioned by English traders to scout the possibility of trade with Cherokee. The ranger was killed. In contrast, Chickasaw were considered more hospitable than Cherokee. In 1673, Virginians James Needham and Gabriel Arthur planned a mission to establish trade between Cherokees and Virginia colony. The island heard the crack of the trader's rifle. Many were killed. They were coming from South Carolina through what's now Kingsport to establish trade with the Overhill Cherokees in the Great Trading Path. French at the same time in lower Mississippi Valley compete. Firm trading wasn't until 1730. In 1730, Attacullaculla was a member of a delegation of Cherokee leaders who traveled to England. In 1736, he rejected the advances of the French, who had sent emissaries to the Overhill Cherokee. 3 or 4 years later, he was captured by the Ottawa, allies of the French. They held him captive in Quebec until 1748. Upon his return, he became one of the Cherokee's leading diplomats, and an advisor to the beloved man of Chota, which had become the primary town of the Overhill settlements. Chief Moytoy was in power, and many traders lived with Cherokee, but nearly half of the Cherokee population were killed in 1738 due to smallpox. Ogohege or Holston River system was referred to as Cat-cloo, Coot-claw, or Coot-claw by the Cherokee Indians, but the Europeans called it the Indian River because it flowed towards and into Cherokee country to the southwest, down as far as its junction with the French Broad. Colonel James Patton of August County, Virginia, claimed to be the first English subject to discover the waters of 2 rivers south and west of New River prior to 1743. He petitioned the Virginia government for 200,000 acres. Stephen Holston, a corn hunter, went into the region about 1746. The Holston or Holstein name was of Scandinavian, probably Swedish extraction. Holston had been on a hunting trip over the mountains years before, and had returned to the bold spring whose waters flowed southwest, about 30 yards from the head spring of the Holston, 8.5 miles east of Marion, Virginia. Holston built his cabin there, just across the divide of the waters from those of New River, about 9 miles east of the site chosen by Samuel Stalnaker for his own cabin. Stephen Holston had an occupant claim, corn or cabin rights, to a tract of land on the head branch of the stream's middle fork, which tract he sold to James Davis, who gave it the name Davis's Fancy. Shortly after selling to Davis, Holston and some neighbors set out to explore the lower reaches of the river. It is not known what date this happened. They constructed canoes and passed downstream into Tennessee, Ohio, and Mississippi as far as Natchez. On March 26, 1747, a tract was surveyed for James Wood on Holston Creek. The earliest grant on Holston River was 996 acres surveyed on March 14, 1748, for Charles St. Clair. Samuel Stalnaker was one of the early pioneers from the lower Shenandoah Valley of German descent. Stalnaker's settlement is put down as the extreme western habitation in Friant Jefferson's map. He was doubtless a hunter and Indian trader who had visited the Cherokee and was acquainted with the route to Cumberland Gap, upon which Dr. Thomas Walker had never been, or he would not have needed a guide. The upper Tennessee Valley, which Virginians thought was within their boundaries, was not acknowledged officially on maps until 1748, when Dr. Thomas Walker, physician, surveyor, explorer, land speculator, and guardian of Thomas Jefferson, was sent out by the Loyal Land Company of Virginia after receiving an 800,000 acre grant of borderland. Dr. Thomas Walker was accompanied by Patton, Buchanan, John Findley, and others past the frontier of civilization into Holston Valley on the Indian River passing through Tennessee country. The first designation of the Indian River as Holston's River was by Dr. Walker, a man who had a penchant for naming rivers, mountains, and gaps in his journal of 1748 through 49. It is probable that Dr. Walker learned of the exploits of Holston on one of his visits from Samuel Stalnaker, or Patton and Buchanan, and the legendary stories worthy of having his name firmly fixed to the graceful and beautiful stream. The name of Holston was soon to find its way onto maps. The chief tributaries of Holston River are Sinking Creek, Beaver Creek, Fall Creek, Kendrick Creek, Muddy Creek, and Reedy Creek, but the north section of Reedy Creek was Boozy Creek. Dr. Walker, accompanied with a party of long hunters who were probably already familiar with the region, came down the upper Holston Valley, followed well-beaten bison trails westward, and crossed the Clinch and Powell rivers. From this point, Walker and his wilderness scouts pushed north into Kentucky through the great mountain pass he later named Cumberland Gap in honor of the Duke of Cumberland. This region then began to excite attention for settlement. They came with the second exploring party to Long Island in 1750, with Ambrose Powell, William Tomlinson, Henry Lawless, Colby Chew, and John Hughes. They were mounted, armed with dogs and pack mules. According to a record of the travels, they spent some days looking for their horses, and would find the track of the steeds one evening, but continued to look until they found them the next day. Trading with unnamed locals that lived there, and camping near their homes, Walker wrote concise sentences to summarize a day, such as, "The Sabbath, grass is plenty in the low grounds," or, "We left the inhabitants and kept nigh west to a large spring on a branch of the north fork of the Holston. Thunder, lightning, and rain before day." This particular day when they left the inhabitants was March 26th. Soon after, they referred to what they considered to be West Creek as Reedy Creek. 27th. It began to snow in the morning and continued till noon. The land is very hilly from west to north. Some snow lies on the tops of the mountains northwest from us. 28th. We traveled to the lower end of Giant's Ditch on Reedy Creek. 29th. Our dogs were very uneasy most of the night. 30th. We kept down Reedy Creek and discovered the tracks of about 20 Indians that had gone up the creek between the time we camped last night and set off this morning. We suppose they made our dogs so restless last night. We camped on Reedy Creek. 30th. We caught 2 young buffaloes, one of which we killed, and having cut and marked the other, we turned him out. 31st. We kept down Reedy Creek to Holston. Measured large elm, 25 feet around, 3 feet off from the ground. We saw young sheldrakes. We went down the river to the North Fork, and up the North Fork about a quarter of a mile to a ford, and then crossed it. The old ford was located a short distance upriver from present Rotherwood Bridge. In the fork between the Holstons and the North River are 5 Indian houses built with logs and covered with bark. There were abundance of bones, some whole pots and pans unbroken, and many pieces of mats and cloth. On the west side of the North River is 4 Indian houses. We went 4 miles below the North River and camped on the bank of the Holstons, opposite to a large Indian fort. The fort was at or near Solitude Ford. Dr. Walker marked his name April 1st, 1750, on several beech trees on the North River bank of Holston Defense property. They camped 5 miles up the creek and west end of Giant's Ditch, Boozy Creek, old name of North Fork of Reedy Creek, which flows into the South Fork of Holston at the foot of Long Island. Williams notes that at the mouth of Reedy Creek is Long Island of Holston, one of the most historic spots in the Old Southwest.